Welcome to the People Profit Podcast, where we explore how investing in people and intentional leadership drives real success. I'm Sandra Coker, CEO of Human Power Solutions and the author of the best-selling book, People Profit. And today we are talking about something organizations get wrong. They think they have a strategy problem when they really have a courage problem. Our guest today is Thane Bellomo. He's a 30-year organizational development consultant and executive coach who has worked with Fortune 500 leaders. He has spent 12 years in the nuclear industry. That's fascinating, where leadership failure is a life or death issue. I can imagine what that's like. And he's also the author of the book, The Courage Economy. Welcome to the show, Thane. Thanks for coming in.
Thank you. Thank you for having me.
Yeah.
Happy to be here.
We're excited. If Thane's insights on building cultures of honesty and courage resonate with you, please hit the like, subscribe, and share this episode with a leader in your network. Your support really does help us spread these important conversations. Thane, you ready to go?
I'm ready. Yeah.
Awesome. So I don't think that I've had any podcast that really talked about courage, and I'm super excited to talk with you today about that. And your path, career path wasn't linear. 53 jobs before building a coaching practice.
At last count. Yep. 53.
Can you talk about your journey?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I think that, let's be honest, most of those jobs were like jobs in college, jobs when I was in high school, when you're working at Wendy's frying up the chicken and somebody comes and says, why don't you work at my pizza joint? You're like, okay, I'll go work at your pizza joint.
Yeah.
But I think that being exposed to 53 organizations, multiple leaders within those organizations, was a real learning experience for me. You learn what works, what doesn't work, what's bad, what's good, and you get so much exposure to different leadership styles, to different organizational cultures. At the time, I didn't know it. I thought I was just making, money on the side, but I really learned a lot from all that.
I think it's fascinating. I've been in hospitality forever and worked for a bunch of different, cooked my way through college, the whole thing. And, in each restaurant, you're exposed to these different management styles. And I agree with you totally. I think it's, if you work your way high school through college, you are just going to see what works and what doesn't work. So, you get into the nuclear energy sector, which I can't imagine is I'm sure it's very regulated. I may or may not be right, but I mean, I would think that there's a lot of rules around that. And
Oh yeah.
yeah, so it's a safety critical environment. If anything goes wrong, we all know about Chernobyl and things like that. How did working in that like safety critical environment shape your view of honesty and standards in the workplace?
Yeah. Well, working in the nuclear industry taught me that what you think is possible, or I'm sorry, what you think is impossible is actually possible. So, I grew up in my career as an organizational development consultant, your typical path, learning and development, stand-up training, working, building sort of talent structures. And in that world, there is um, sort of a way you do things, and there is a way that you operate with people. And it's all informed by the same kind of books and the same articles and the same theories and everything. And much of that was built around, we need to get people's hearts engaged in what we're doing. We need to build engagement before we can get the kind of results that we want. And I walked into the nuclear industry, and they operated exactly opposite to that.
Right.
It was, I don't care what you feel like, and I don't care what you think. This is the standard. This is what has to happen, because if we don't, really bad things can happen.
Right.
And so it completely transformed my way of thinking about organizational development, about leadership, about getting people aligned, about getting people engaged in what you're trying to do. And and that was sort of where, you know, I created, or I thought up, or I designed this idea of the courage economy, the idea that courage is what's lacking in most organizations. And that gap is often the gap that leads to poor performance
Yeah.
that leads to suboptimal outcomes.
So that's interesting. Do you think that going into the nuclear industry, so I agree, L&D right now is a lot about like, let's make everybody feel good and let's hold them accountable in this way, but not hurt their feelings, all that kind of stuff.
Right.
And I say it with a bit of sarcasm, but that's really the way it is right now. Do you feel like people going into these highly regulated industries, whether it's oil, nuclear, wherever that is, are they the individuals that are like, that's the kind of environment I want? Or did you have to really kind of get people to understand that that's just the way that it is?
Well, the nuclear industry itself is rather insular. So the people in the nuclear industry are generally people who've been in the nuclear industry.
Okay.
People that are coming into the nuclear industry are often, um, well, typically they come from highly technical engineering backgrounds. So a lot of them are kind of okay with the idea that we have to have a process, that we have to do it a certain way. So the learning curve or the cultural learning curve for those people is typically a little less.
Okay.
Now, if I think about people like in HR and some of the support functions that are supporting nuclear, they often have a little bit of a shocker,
Yeah.
as I did. I'm like, well, you're just going to sort of beat people over the head to do this thing. And they're like, yeah, that's how we do it here,
Yeah. Yeah.
But what I found was that I say beat people over the head,
I,
and I say that tongue in
yeah.
cheek because that's not really what they're doing. But what they are doing is having a very high standard and an expectation that people meet the standard. And if you
Hmm.
don't meet the standard, there's a consequence. And it is the exact opposite of what I call the comfort economy,
Hmm. Okay.
that most organizations are designed around kind of what you just said, that we need to have a frictionless workplace, that everybody needs to kind of feel good about what we're doing
Yeah.
and with each other. And that dynamic um, is not great for a couple of reasons. But the biggest reason is, ooh, you hear that?
1 second. Yep. They're just going by.
That's
That's what I haven't.
okay.
That's why we're never live. We're always have an editor.
Let's see, where was I? Oh, the comfort economy. The comfort economy, this idea that we need to all sort of get along and not hurt each other's feelings, et cetera, really leads to what I call the lie economy.
Yeah, that was my next
Because
question.
the comfort economy, like if you can't hurt people's feelings, if everybody has to get along, then you necessarily have to soften your feedback. You have to omit information. And that obviously is not great
Yeah.
because in order to get the best results, we need the truth. We need to understand what the truth is. And furthermore, the comfort economy leaves the door open for those malicious actors.
Yeah.
And if you've ever been in corporate, we know who they are,
Hmm.
the politicos and the maneuverers and all those kind of people. And that in totality creates this, what I call the lie economy. And it is the aggregate management debt that your organization accrues when um, the thousands and millions of tiny little lies, white lies, fibs, we can call whatever euphemism you want, but they damage the organization. They damage trust. They damage the ability of people to believe what's happening around them. Who can
Hmm.
I trust? What do I believe? um, that drag on the organization obviously makes it more difficult for the organization to be successful.
So for newer leaders coming into the marketplace and coming into management and now getting into those quote unquote meetings,
Mm-hmm.
how does what does the lie economy look like to them? Like, how can they recognize those signs for themselves and to help train them and avoid doing that?
Right. Well, um, you know, once you get into corporate and then once you get a leadership position, it quickly becomes very apparent that there is a whole layer of things that you need to navigate. That's not really okay. We have a problem. What's the what's the solution? Let's execute it.
Yeah.
Right. Beyond that, there's a whole layer of things that people have to navigate, and that would be, what people would typically call sort of office politics, or and sort of how do we manage working with each other in this environment. So new leaders, it's very easy to see when you want funding for a project and they say, and you're told, well, we don't really have the funding for that. And you quickly come to see, well, that's not true. They actually do have funding. They just don't have funding for me.
Right. Yeah.
Or I have this idea, and you could read on the faces of the leaders around you that they're not appreciating this idea you have, and you get, well, let's put that on the parking lot. We'll
Yeah.
come back to that. And then of course you never come back to it.
Yeah.
So these are the little cues that you see all the time, and you kind of quickly understand that there is a whole set of what I call lies that you have to navigate.
Hmm.
You have to discern, who can I trust? Who do I not trust? What do I believe? What do I not believe? And obviously that's all contextual to what they're doing, and
Yeah.
and what the organization is doing. So
I think it's really
reading
hard.
those tea leaves
Yeah.
is, be on the lookout for this. The question really becomes for new leaders, how do I navigate that?
Right. Yeah.
And so that's what my book's about, the courage economy. It's how do you navigate?
I think it's so important because it's stuff that we don't talk about, that people just don't talk about, the fact that there are these, we hear the toxic environment, we hear the side conversations and the silos, but we actually don't really actually get a definition of what that looks like. So I think you giving that kind of really, really good lens about these little lies, these white lies, and some examples really do help people, kind of figure that out. And I think and in this hybrid environment, like this hybrid remote environment, it's even harder to read people.
Yep.
You know?
Yep. It absolutely is.
Yeah.
In the book, I have a list of 30 different of these lies. The list I actually created was like 150, but my editor was like, you can't put 150 in there, you put 30.
So your core philosophy, I was reading your bio and everything. Your core philosophy is, if you want teamwork, give the teamwork. I absolutely resonated with that, because I've got two 20 somethings who are in the trenches right now, working their little butts off. And one of them, and I won't say who, because if they're listening, they'll know, but I don't want their bosses to know. One of them has been with a large company for a few years, and she's just like, and she's moving up because she's trying to find work. She's bored. She's so bored. Like, she's like, I don't know what I'm supposed to be doing. They're not giving me anything. They don't trust. Right? And then she keeps, she's in the same company, moving around. She finally, this weekend, we were talking, and she's like, I talked to my manager. She's like, you got to give me some clarity on what my role is, but it's taken her 3 years to do that. And I think that's really hard for young people. So that being said, how does shared, difficult work, because sometimes the bosses are like, this is too hard for you. You may not be able to navigate through it. But how does it build real collaboration and better trust when you do share that work?
Well, so I'll tell a story to illustrate this. So in a nuclear power plant, every 2 years, the plant shuts down for between 3 to 6 weeks, and that's what they call the nuclear refueling outage. And that's where they take the spent uranium out, they put the new uranium in, and they do all the upgrades and repairs on the plant that cannot be done when the reactor is running. The project plan for that takes 2 years to build, and there's about 1,000 people on a nuclear power plant, give or take. During an outage, another 1,000 come on, and the work goes 24/7 until all the upgrades are complete and the new fuel is put into the reactor. That is the World Series, the Super Bowl, all combined in the nuclear world.
Yeah.
Oh. It is amazing to watch, actually, the amount of work being done, this sort of ballet of work being done. And I only tell that story to say that during online, when there's not an outage, a nuclear power plant is a lot like most companies. There's a lie economy. There's people jockeying for position. There's people trying to get promoted, yada, yada, yada. During an outage, all that goes away. And the reason it goes away is because the work is so critically important to everybody on that plant. The success of that has to be on time, under budget, no safety incidents, no radiation exposure. It's so important that nobody has any time for lies. They have no time for sugarcoating. They have no time for any of that nonsense. And that encapsulates this idea. If you want teamwork, give the teamwork. If you want a courage economy, people need to be involved in important work, and work that is important to them. Because, like I ask people, if you have important work to do, suppose it has something to do with your kids. Would you tolerate lies?
Right.
Would
Right.
you tolerate? You wouldn't. You wouldn't tolerate any of it. So, I always, the other quote is, "It's not enough to ask people to be courageous. You need to design the work so that courage is required."
Yeah. Take some
Because
risks.
asking people to be courageous doesn't work.
Yeah.
Asking people, it's like I've had to lose 15 pounds for like forever. And I don't do it. Even though I know I should. I know how to do it,
Right.
but I don't do it. Right. But if somebody said, "I'll give you $1 million if you lose 15 pounds," you
Better.
bet your skinny I would do it. so,
That's a good
so,
motivator, huh?
well, right. So when people are involved in work that is important, they tend not to engage in the comfort economy, the lie
Yeah.
economy. We understand why they do, right? I mean, I'm not in any way saying that people are sort of engaged in this maliciously. They're not.
Yeah.
They're they're involved in a system that incentivizes that behavior.
Yeah.
And indeed, a system that where they can't not succeed unless they engage in that.
So,
So,
yeah, that kind of flips me to like your rewards inventory exercise, which I thought was pretty
mhm,
cool, right? So, how can leaders check, whether they're actually rewarding courage or that lie slash comfort economy? Because I thought that was
yeah.
pretty interesting.
Well, I think the way to kind of go into this is that, an organization is optimized for whatever it does,
Yeah.
not what we want it to be. So whatever outcomes you're getting, if you have a situation where you have like a lie economy, then it's there for a purpose,
Okay.
right? It's a rational thing. People are operating rationally in that environment. And so the rewards inventory is really about, okay, what do we actually reward here? Like when we promote people, are we promoting them because they are um, the best person for that role, or are we promoting them because they're the VP of legal's
Nephew.
nephew,
Right. Yeah.
right? Do we reward people for telling the truth if it's an uncomfortable truth, or do we reward people for just don't talk about that?
Hmm.
So the rewards inventory is a sort of structured way that I've developed to go through what are you rewarding in your organization? What behaviors are you actually rewarding?
Yeah.
And kind of get right down to the nitty gritty because people are rational. They do whatever they're rewarded for and they avoid whatever they're punished for. And that is how culture is built.
Hmm.
It's funny. I go on LinkedIn and everybody has like a bajillion articles about, culture. Where does it come from? And it's just not that
It
complicated.
isn't.
What you reward, what you punish, what you tolerate. That's your culture,
Yeah. And how you communicate it, period.
right?
Right.
So, so the rewards inventory is a structured way to go through that, and any leader, I would recommend to engage in that activity. To if you want a courage economy,
Yes.
because let's be honest, a lot of leaders are in their position because they're very good at navigating a lie economy,
Yeah. Yeah.
and they don't have a lot of reason to get rid of it.
So in your experience in speaking again to the newer leaders, what would you say, like, why is a courage economy more efficient in the long run than protecting that comfort slash lie economy?
Right. Well, it's more effective because if you build a courage economy, you build an organization that's fundamentally built on trust. People talk all the time about trust, right?
Yeah.
And how and if I don't have to figure out who can I trust, who can I not trust, what do I should I say this, should I not say this? If I don't have to navigate all that nonsense and I can develop an organization, ultimately the goal is to build what a community, right? People who actually care about each other and the work we're engaged in.
Yeah.
And I know that sounds a little like fuzzy and soft, but it's not
It's not.
because, when people are engaged in important work, they're challenging each other, they're, wrestling with these ideas, trying to understand what the truth is. Over time, they begin to trust one another. And over time, they begin to develop a community, people who care about each other and the work. And I would challenge anyone, people in that environment can accomplish freaking anything.
Yeah.
And I saw that in the outage at a nuclear power plant. What goes on there only happens because the lie economy disappears. If it didn't, the outage wouldn't be successful.
Yeah. So we talked earlier too about the remote and the hybrid environments. How how does the lie economy show up more easily there? And how do you recognize those dynamics without having that face to face conversation? Because you can read people in a room. You can walk into a room and know, but you can get on
Yeah,
Zoom and not necessarily know.
yeah, it becomes much, much more difficult. And I think that the key, first of all, as a leader, as a new leader, the first thing you should be concerned about is making sure that the work you're engaged in is actually important. And I differentiate that from what is necessary work, right? Necessary work is like if you run a supermarket, it's necessary that the shelves are stocked, but that's not important work. It's not work that's moving the organization to a different place. So as new leaders or any leaders, being focused on, okay, is this work important? Let's engage in important work, right? And let's present the work and demonstrate to people that the work we're doing is important. So how would you know that something in the organization is important? Because leaders talk about it, they measure it, they make time for it, they make budget for it, they talk about it some more, they measure it some more, right? You know what's important and you know what's not important.
Right.
So as a leader, make sure that you're doing something that is important. And um, again, the attributes of the lie economy tend to not surface themselves. Now, if you're remote, like you said, reading cues and whatnot, yes, definitely more difficult. Um, and if someone's lying to you, then how do you tell if someone's lying to you? That only reveals itself over time. But as a leader, the important thing is that you're not only engaged in important work, but you are holding people to a standard, that you are aligning the organization on whatever we're trying to accomplish, and monitoring the organization for what to be the attributes of the lie
Right.
economy.
Yeah.
So when people, are coming to you and they are obviously self-promoting,
Mm-hmm. Yep.
right? Understand what that is,
Yep.
and and be like, okay, I recognize this is somebody trying to maneuver in this lie economy. I don't want a lie economy.
Right.
So I'm not going to tolerate that, or at least I'm not going to pay attention to that.
Gotcha. Yeah. So when you have a leader that says maybe they read your book, well, they do read your book.
Mm-hmm,
Everyone read his book. Um, uh,
mm-hmm,
when that happens, and a leader says, you know what, I'm going to move from this comfort/lie economy, and I'm going to start holding people to a higher standard
mm-hmm,
and give real feedback and really like
mm-hmm.
what if you like what's that transition like for the environment and for the employees?
Yeah.
And what's it like for the leader too? Like what are they feeling?
Well, first of all, it's all painful because frankly, any cultural change is kind of painful, right? You have what you're used to, and now we got to do something different. So it's relatively painful. But the first thing that leaders have to recognize is that they themselves have to hold themselves to the same standard. The lie economy affords leaders many privileges. I can come and go as I please. Like in the book, I talk about a leader I worked with. She had a doctor's appointment. She would just waltz out, waltz back in whenever. Now, the people that reported to her, a couple of levels down, they were not allowed to waltz out and waltz in. And I asked her, how do you deal with that sort of incongruity? And she said, well, she paused for a minute and she said, well, I've earned it.
Ugh.
And I looked at her like, that's fascinating. It's like from a sociological perspective, it's fascinating that in her mind, she paid her dues, and part of um, the privilege she had was that she could come and go as she pleased, and so that um, furthers the lie economy, right?
Right.
So if you are a leader, then you are going to have to first change. You're going to have to first divest yourself of the privileges of working in the comfort economy and the lie economy, and hold yourself accountable to that standard. And yes, some people are going to leave. For example, many people are, like I said before, in a position because they're very good at navigating the lie economy.
Right.
They're good at the show. They're good at, and it's funny. I was actually on LinkedIn the other day and there was a whole article about managing up and how do you make sure everybody notices what you're doing and all that. And there's a utility to that because that's how the lie economy works. And that's how most organizations operate. Um, so the people that are, that don't want to be held to the standard, the people whose skills in navigating the lie economy are now degraded or devalued, they might leave. But you know what? That's okay, because
Yeah.
they're not the people you want in your organization,
Yeah.
right? So this is a good thing. And as a leader, maybe that means, um, you're well, another example from the book. I worked with a colleague who was harassed by someone and took it up the chain. And guess what happened? Nothing, because that person was their best salesperson.
That
In a,
drives
in a
me crazy.
well, of course. I mean, but that is the lie economy in action,
Right.
right? In a courage economy, it's a painful decision, but
Mhm.
an easy one. Like we can't tolerate
Right.
that, right?
Right.
So the pain is going to be in those areas. It's going to be in resistance from all levels of the organization, because they have calibrated how they work and how they interact based on the lie economy, and now they have to do something different, the courage economy. And um, so yeah, it's painful, but the transition, as I've seen, right, this is not just like something I made up.
Right.
I've actually seen this in action, what an organization is capable of when they divest or rid themselves of all of this nonsense that everybody has to swim through all the time.
Yeah. It's exhausting.
It is.
I mean, I've worked for big corporations, and I think obviously we both have, and it is just so tiring. And I think
Yeah.
it, because you want to come in and do your best work, and you don't want to have to navigate through all this BS,
Right.
throughout the day. And when we're going into companies, it's the same. This person doesn't like this person. Like, you know what? Let's just get aligned on the work. Like, we're not all
Right.
going to be the same people, especially now. People just have such diverse beliefs and blah, blah, blah. It's like, let's put all that stuff aside. Let's just do the work.
Right.
But that's a Gen X like attitude, right? Buckle up, buttercup. But our younger generation isn't used to that. So I think there's a lot of things that need to kind of, be
Well,
explained,
and
or,
but in the nuclear industry, again, another learning from that was that we had all kinds of young people obviously come in to the organization,
mm-hmm.
and in the face of, or when engaged with important work,
Yeah.
they tend to not act like that. They tend to not, they want to engage. Everybody wants to be a valuable member of a winning team
Yeah.
doing something important.
Yeah.
Like, that's all anybody really wants to be. And if you can create that for people, then you're 90% there, because they will then give you discretionary effort. They will then engage with what you're trying to do.
Yeah.
In the book, I talk about, in the nuclear industry, they do have problems recruiting people sometimes, because it is such a environment.
Yeah.
And I talked to one of the regulators, and he was like, well, maybe we should lower our standards to invite more people into the business. I'm like, don't do it, man.
Yeah.
Like, people want to be involved in important stuff, even if it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
And, like, a buddy of mine joined the Marines, when I was younger. And I'm like, dude, why did you join the Marines? Like, there's a lot easier ones you could do. And he's like, I want to be part of the best.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And I was like, okay, you know. So people want to be involved in something important.
Yeah. I agree
And
with that.
if you could create that for them.
Yeah. Because at the end of the day, everybody wants to leave work and leave there and know that they've done something and that they've accomplished something throughout the day.
Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. So I have a segment. It's a rapid fire segment, just some quick hit questions, short answers.
Okay.
You up for that?
Yep.
I know it's early in the morning. All right. All right. So ready? All right.
Yeah.
All right. So, what is one sign your team is operating in the lie economy?
One sign, if they are engaging in any of the list of 30 or more lies in the lie inventory that I've created. So if you hear things like parking lot, if you hear things like you need more leadership presence, that's why you're not getting promoted, right? Ambiguous answers are part and parcel of the lie economy. So look for ambiguity.
Okay. The biggest cost of protecting comfort of the lie economy.
I mean, the biggest cost is just lack of trust.
Yeah.
That's it.
Mm-hmm.
And if you can't discern what's true and what's not true, who you can trust and who you can't trust, then you are having to spend enormous cognitive energy trying to figure that
Yeah,
out.
and you're in the thick of it. All right.
Right.
What is one question every leader should ask themselves regularly?
Am I a liar?
Wow.
I say that tongue in cheek, but how am I
Yeah.
engaging in the lie economy,
Yeah.
right? How am I engaging in furthering it and benefiting from it? And yeah,
Yeah.
how am I complicit?
I think that's going to be our clip. Am I a liar? That's what's going to draw people to watch this episode. All right. What's the best? What's the best way to start giving your team real shared work?
The best thing to do to give real shared work is when you're trying to figure out what work you should do in order to determine if it's quote unquote important work,
Mm-hmm.
recruit people to the team. This is what we're doing. This is why I think it's important. Do you want to be a part of this? And give them the option to not be a part of it. And
Interesting.
if you cannot sell people on the work, then you should maybe reconsider. Maybe it's not that important.
Okay. I like it. All right. What does the courage economy culture feel like day to day to employees?
I mean, in a real courage economy, day to day to employees, people come to work and they engage with the work. They're not engaging with all this extraneous stuff we've talked about today.
Yeah.
And what I've seen is that it's funny in the nuclear world, the outage you would think would be something that they dread because it's so much work,
Yeah.
but yet it's something that they all look forward to
Yeah.
because they can just go in and they do something amazing.
But like you said, it's a Super Bowl, it's a World Series, it is the
Yeah,
thing, right? And I think
right,
people love that. They're like, at the end of the day, they're like, we won. You know,
right.
everyone likes
And
to
you can
win,
and you can design that. You don't have to be a nuclear power plant. You
right?
can design your work like that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, love it. That's excellent. Thank you so much.
Mm-hmm.
So if you could leave our listener, this can be a longer answer. If you can leave our listeners with one key thought about courage and leadership, what would it be?
I think the what I said earlier, it's not enough to ask people to be courageous. You must design the work so that courage is required.
Mm. That's powerful. Thank you so much for your honesty today, your practical wisdom that you brought today. It was a wonderful, wonderful conversation. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, no problem. That wraps up another insightful episode of the People Profit Podcast. If Thane's message on building a courage economy inspired you, again, please like, subscribe, and share this episode. Thane, before we go, can you tell our audience the best way to connect with you and Bellomo Leadership and your book?
Yeah. So BellomoLeadership.com is where you can find me. The book is in pre-order right now on Amazon, The Courage Economy. And I'm also on my Substack at The Courage Economy. And I have a YouTube channel, The Courage Economy Podcast, where it's just me talking about the courage economy.
I love that. I love that. And make sure you connect with him on LinkedIn as well. So thank you again. We really appreciate it. Reach out to Thane, to Thane. I really appreciate you being here today. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. And leaders, remember, courage costs less than comfort in the long run. I'm Sandra Coker. We'll see you on the next episode.